if the government wanted something that was sort of easy and relatively costless, not like lockdowns, to make it look as though they could do something to control the virus. Look at us, the great government, we can control this virus. And then they just couldn't admit error.
Yeah. I remember in the very early months seeing news that the Chinese dictatorship basically called to its expats around the world to hoover up all the PPE, the masks and the gloves and the goggles that they could. And so in January, February, March, when the West wasn't really paying close attention, millions of dollars worth of personal protection equipment was hoovered up in the UK, United States, Canada, Australia, and sent to China. This is not a rumor or a theory. They just bought them up. And so part of me thought, well, it must be valuable if China is hoovering them up. But I think, no, I think you're right. It's just someone thought, well, we got to do something. And this is a something. And I thought, well, if China is doing that something, maybe it's strategically important. There was no science underneath any of this. And I think that was one of the points of the judge. Is you got to answer questions. You got to be transparent. You have to be open to comment. You can't just issue a regulation that destroys lives and industries and be immune from scrutiny. I think that's why this judge ruled the way she did.
Absolutely. The judge's decision, and I'll say with a caveat, it's very long. I haven't had a chance to fully read the whole thing. I've skimmed it a couple of times, but haven't done as careful of a reading as I'd like to. But I think it's very well thought out. And one of the interesting things about this is the judge happens to be, she's a Trump appointee. She's 35, which is, of course, very young for a federal judge. And most of the comments I've seen on social media criticizing her are limited to her age, gender. It seems, she's a 35-year-old female judge, Trump appointee. None of them have actually taken issue with her legal reasoning, which is quite sound. She's basically said that the CDC does not have the authority. It's similar to the vaccine, some of the federal vaccine mandate cases, and it's also similar to the CDC eviction moratorium cases. In fact, this was the same statute that the CDC used to say that it had the authority to halt evictions nationwide in the U.S., and that the Supreme Court struck down that action. So it was very similar reasoning, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I skimmed it, and I think she sums it up really at the end, where she says, "Sorry, you can't just. This is not how you make laws in America. Yeah. You can't just short circuit the public comment, and you're not a legislature. You're an agency. You can't just issue edicts from the high on Mount Olympus." And I think it's obvious that Congress, I mean, you've got the House of Representatives, the Senate, the presidency, they're all in the hands of the Democrats. If they really believed in this, they could enact a law through the legislature. I guess they could appeal it to a higher court. I think that this judge, in a way, has done Joe Biden a huge favor by removing this irritant on the population that the Democrats had been so politically invested in, that they were sort of backed into a corner. They couldn't lose face, and now they can say, well, a judge threw it out, so they can keep the win. Oh, we care more than you guys. It was a Trump judge, but the actual pain is being relieved in America 7 months before their midterm elections.
I think that's exactly right. I think that's exactly the correct interpretation. Now, there have been a couple of, it's unclear whether they'll appeal or not. I heard this morning that they weren't going to, and then I heard that they were going to. So if they don't appeal, that would be interesting. It would sort of be a concession that either they were afraid they'd lose in the circuit court and create bad law, or that they really didn't want to push this mandate, but for some reason felt they had to, and they're kind of relieved that it's out of their hands, as you say. Now they can just blame it on the Trump judge.
Yeah. It's April 2022. Mask mandates have been in effect for a long time. It feels like ages, that it took ages for this to get to this court. The CDC says it would have removed the mandate in a couple of weeks, but we've heard that 2-week promise before. But I have to note that here in Canada, I think I told you this before, our Supreme Court has yet to weigh in on any lockdown issue. Just, they haven't. Wow. And our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which was once considered a defining Canadian document, has not in any case successfully struck down an infringement. And we got some crazy stuff going on up here. Like, we had a full-blown 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew in the large province of Quebec. So I'm starting to think, what is the use of our whole vaunted check and balance legal system if it can't stop the biggest civil liberties inferno in world history, perhaps, since slavery, I guess? What use is it? I mean, here we are, and a judge finally strikes it down in America. And of course, she's, as you point out, she's attacked for being a young woman Trump appointee. But at least you had something. In Canada, I want to let you know, Jenin, that you cannot get on an airplane, even domestically, if you're unvaxxed. You just cannot fly or take the train in the second largest country in the world. You just can't.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. So there are plenty of people here who want that. And in fact, I believe it's one of the guy that Biden appointed to be as COVID czar, whatever that means, was saying that we should be looking at vaccination requirements for domestic air travel. So what you have in America is sort of an interesting just divide between the Republican and Democratic strongholds. And frankly, in the Democratic strongholds, I mean, it's not really any better than what you're talking about. In New York, they're continuing the toddler mask mandate. It's 2 to 4-year-olds are the only population required to be masked. A judge struck it down, actually, and then the city immediately appealed for a stay. That's sort of called like an immediate, to immediately halt the effect of the lower court's order. And so that later that day, the toddler mask mandate was kept in effect. So, you know, the good things are coming out of these Republican strongholds. And we would be in the same situation, I think, if we were in Democratic majority jurisdictions. And the lesson really is that it's the populace. It's the populace that drives the politicians, and it's the populace that drives the judges in the end.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.